Welcome to Murder at the Round Table. I'm Ipsha.
I'm Raf.
Today's case, or cases, I don't really know how to shorten everything, is a bit long, so we are skipping the pre-segment. I am doing today's case on Nahanni National Park Reserve. Let's start with the trigger warning. Trigger warning, this case does talk about decapitation. The case is unsolved. I feel like to me sometimes that can be triggering because I want to know what's happening and what happened. So if that triggers you in any way, please join us for the next episode. There's also mentions of mental health and suicide. My sources are, I have a bunch of them. Website sources are AbenakiExtreme.com, mysteriesofcanada.com, strangeoutdoors.com, jmplumbly.com, and alaskatreks.com. Podcast sources: Mr. Ballen Podcast, Canadian Unsolved Mysteries, Dark Poutine, Moonlight Lore, and audiobook sources: Legends of Nahanni Valley by Hammerson Peters. So as you can tell, I have been putting in a lot of time to do this research because I heard one of the incidents that I will be talking about on a podcast, and I'm like, guys, I need to talk about this somewhere. And I think I've told a lot of people about this case. And then I got the audiobook because I couldn't find enough information about this case to put it into a story. So I got the audiobook and I started listening, and I realized this is an entire can of worms, and it wouldn't be fair to not tell all of it. So yeah, this is going to be a series. I'm going to be talking about multiple incidents that occurred in Nahanni National Park. Yeah, before I get into today's topic, I want to share some information about Canada itself, and maybe it'll help you with understanding the case a little bit more. So from the Dark Poutines podcast, the host shared that Canada is the second largest country in the world in terms of land, and this also includes the water bodies within the country. It is about 9,994,676 square kilometers. That being said, only 20% of Canada is habited, which means 80% is not. So basically nobody lives in that 80%. And in brackets I said, currently the 20% that is habited is on fire. Take that as you will. Dark Poutine also adds that 90% of majority of Canadians live in clusters close to the US border, which makes sense why all the smoke and fire is going to the border, past the border into the United States. Safe to say much of Canada is yet to be explored. For today's case, like I said, I'm taking you to the Northwest Territories. So if you search up the national park, it is absolutely gorgeous. And I'm going to let you guys do that and tell me what you think. So only Nahanni National Park, nothing else.
Wait, let's look this up. It looks like something like Lord of the Rings style, you know?
It's really
Yeah, I
beautiful.
like it.
So a little bit about the park itself. So it's in the Northwest Territories. It is over 30,000 square kilometers. Nahanni is located along the Mackenzie Mountain Range, it is centered around South Nahanni River. It's going to be relevant later. So the next part isn't really important, but I thought it was funny. So the Nahanni River, it unites four canyons. And the name of the canyons are First, Second, Third, and Fourth Canyon.
I probably would have done the same.
I thought it was very creative. The park is also home to Virginia Falls, which is twice the drop or height of Niagara Falls. So it's very big and it's very huge, and of course it's very gorgeous. Nahanni became open to the public as a national park in 1976, and it was placed in the World Heritage List in 1978. So you can find more information about Nahanni National Park Reserve on the UNESCO site, but it pretty much explains what I've said before, but in a bit more detailed way. Okay, here comes the creepy shit. So despite her beauty and wonder, she is also home to some of Canada's bizarre legends, which ended up giving her the nicknames Deadman Valley, Headless Creek, Headless Range, and Funeral Range. In total, 44 people went missing in Nahanni Valley, and I did a question mark here because I feel like there's more than 4, but 4 people were found dead and decapitated in all different incidences. Before I get into the stories, and while you listen to my stories and create your own theories, I paraphrased a quote from the podcast Moonlight Lore, and I just want you guys to keep this in the back of your head, and for the listeners too. So the quote goes something along the lines of, "The stories that you will hear today are told by the survivors, and sometimes the survivors have survived at the expense of others." So that was from the host, and they of course say in a more nicer professional ways, and I paraphrase. Okay, so the first story I'm about to tell you happened way before colonization. It's been passed down orally, so the dates are kind of unknown. There are 2 native tribes that we will be hearing about a lot in this series. One is the Dene, and the other one is the Naha. They both lived in and around Nahanni Valley, and I might be wrong, but one podcast did say if you combine the 2 names together, Dene and Naha, you get Nahanni. So a little bit about the tribes. The Naha tribe was the first tribe to settle into Canada at the end of the Paleolithic era. They lived in a very nomadic lifestyle, so they were warriors, they lived off the land. There's theories that they may have been cannibals, but they mostly were hunters and gatherers. Since they were the only people to live in Canada during the time that they arrived, they didn't know the concept of sharing, really. So they didn't have to share their land, their food, their anything with any other groups. So the problem started when other native groups started coming to Canada. They still didn't know anything about sharing, so they became more ferocious and warlike. They would often attack anyone that would come within their land, and the Dene were kind of like the victims of that. They also lived up north. I don't know much about the origins of the Dene, and I will try to find more information about them in the upcoming episodes while I do the series. But the Dene, unlike the Nahan, they actually were in contact with colonizers and traders. Yeah, so they were in communication with anybody that came to trade, but the Naha, they didn't like people. So the story between the 2 groups goes that the Dene tribe came to Nahanni to settle. They put up their teepees, they started their campfires, and one of the men, he says he's going to go find food or berries or something like that. So he leaves his tribes and he comes back after some time. And not sure how much time he took to find these animals or berries or whatever he was looking for, but when he came back, he came to a horrific sight. Every single member of his tribe, his family, his friends were dead and decapitated. Since he knew that the Naha lived in the area and maybe the tribe at some point run into them, he assumed it was the Naha who killed his family and community. So the man gets a little freaked out and goes off to find other Dene tribes to join because he just lost his family and he needs the support. And he basically tells everyone that there's dangerous people living in the Nahanni Valley and nobody should go there. Again, I don't know when this story originated from, but again, just like normal stories, the work of telephone almost, everybody kind of found out and they're like, Naha people are dangerous, we're not going up there. Okay, so we are going to fast forward to the Klondike Gold Rush, which was in the 1890s and afterwards, basically the story I'm going to tell you. There is a map in the exhibits section of our chat. And for the viewers, you will find this in our Instagram page where you can see all the pictures necessary for this case. So it's the second one. It's the second map. So people rushed to Alaska and Yukon to get their gold. There were 3 paths, as you can see. One was the rich man route for rich people, the poor man's route for the poor people, and there was the one that goes through Canada, and it was known as the shortcut. Based on the map, I think the Canadian route passes through Nahanni Valley, or the general area of it. So the shortcut was taken up by 770 people. 5 people made it across. What happened to the other 170 sorry, 765 people, I don't know. Nahanni knows, and some squirrels and shit know, but not us. So the maybe 5 people. Some sources say 2 people, some sources say other numbers, but it was generally 2 to 5 people who made it across. So the 5 people who made it across said there is a tropical valley up there. They said that although it was winter, the valley was hot due to the hot springs, and the place is very lush and green. Even though it was super up north and dead of winter, the land had crops growing, crops that would normally not grow in the winter, like corn, beans, etc. And the animals there were fat to the point where they were literal squares. So once the people from the Klondike Gold Rush took all the gold from Alaska and Yukon, they thought maybe they could go over to the next mountains, the next canyons, to find gold there, because well, if there's gold on this mountain, why can't there be gold on that mountain? I think the next mountain was coming into Nahanni territory, and we know that's a no-go zone by now. If you have any doubts, well, by the end of this episode, you'll have no doubts. I don't know how many people actually went into the next mountain, but they never came back out. And nobody knows what happened to them to this point, really. So that's the end of the Klondike Gold Rush. And this story I heard on the podcast, and I've been crazy about it since. This is the story of the McLeod brothers, Willie and Frank McLeod. So Willie and Frank were born to Murdoch McLeod. I think their father was Scandinavian. I forget exactly. I think he was a Scotsman, but maybe not. I'm not sure. So Murdoch McLeod married a Métis or Dene woman. Her name was never mentioned. And then Frank and Willie were born. They had more kids, but Frank and Willie are kind of the important ones out of this batch. Murdoch also got married later after the death of his first wife, and this time he married a white woman, and he had more children. And we'll meet 3 of them later in the story. I think altogether, one source said he had about 20 kids, but I'm not sure. That's not relevant at all. Willie and Frank, they grew up around Mackenzie region, which at that time was pretty much all of the Northwest Territories. They were very involved in the Hudson's Bay Company, HBC, that's what I'll be calling it from here on. And eventually they became very competent in being outdoors, surviving the wilderness, dealing with the people that they may have encountered. This includes white and native. And a lot of the native groups knew them because they grew up in the area. So this is pretty much known that they were ready to survive the wilderness, and they were very much capable. This is an important note to keep in mind for later. That the important note is that they were pretty much ready to survive the wilderness, and people did think that they were ready for pretty much anything. Our story starts in the 1900s at Fort Liard. If you look at the map that I sent of the first one, Fort Liard should be in there. It's right underneath Nahanni National Park Reserve of Canada. So our story starts in the 1900s in Fort Liard. This is where Fred McLeod, so Frank and Willie's half-brother, worked. He was like the manager or owner of the trade post there. So one day, native, a Naha man, which Naha people, I believe, normally don't come down to trade. So it was kind of a shock for Fred to see a Naha man at the trade post. And one of the things that Hammerson Peter said in his book, that Naha people were like quite big in structure. So he was very big and very strong. So yeah, a Naha man comes into the store, and all he had with him was snowshoes, a rifle, and a medicine bag, and that's it. Which was not normal for people up in the north who were like trading and expediting to have. He didn't really have any visible trading items, and he simply pulled out a gold nugget from his pouch and spent it on items at the post. Which was shocking to Fred, because for white people, gold was of such high value, and this man just comes in and spends it like it's nothing. From this research, and I've heard podcasts about other like mining spots where gold was found, that native people didn't really care for gold. It was more of a colonizer thing, that They really valued gold. This was really extremely shocking to Fred, and he also wanted to know where the gold came from. And the man wasn't really telling him. So Fred offered him tea and tobacco, and the man finally opened up. And he pretty much said he found it somewhere in the South Nahanni River. I don't know where South Nahanni River is on the map. I tried to find the name, but I assume it's just south of Nahanni National Park. Fred really wanted to go find the gold in the South Nahanni River, but he wasn't able to leave his position because he was earning money for his family. Again, there's like 22 people in his family, so understandable. 3 years goes by, and another man, native man, comes in to shop with gold. And at this point, Fred was like, what the heck? What is happening? So he asked the man, gave him some tobacco and tea, and asked where you get it from. And then the man said, up South Nahanni River. Fred was not able to contain himself at this point. So he contacted his brothers, Frank and Willie, about the gold and told them, like, native people are finding these gold. Why don't you go up and see what you can find? So the two were like, okay, we'll go. So they traveled to Liard River. I think Liard River is somewhere on the map. Yeah, it's right under Coal Rivers. Liard River and Fort Liard are two relevant places that come up in the story. So the two traveled up to Liard River into the Nahanni Valley. The two did come back with a fair bit of gold. They used some of the gold to make Frank a gold chain for his pocket watch, and the rest they spent on gambling. The year after, brothers Frank and Willie wanted to go to Nahanni again because they believed they could strike big. This time they took their other half-brother, Charlie. This trip started in winter from Edmonton, and by the time they got to Nahanni, it was spring. The brothers looked at a few places before finding gold, but it wasn't like enough that they could say they striked big. So they came back to Fort Liard to restock supplies, and then they would wait there for the next spring to go back to Nahanni. The trip back to Fort Liard was not easy. The waters were rough, so they lost a lot of the supplies and food and the gold. However, Willie was able to keep some of the gold in his pocket or sash around his waist. When they got to Fort Liard, they were pretty broke, and they were looking for work in the HBC trading post. However, not a lot of people wanted to hire them because of their gambling habits. And when they did get a job, it wasn't great pay. So getting supplies for the next year to go back to Nahanni, it was just unlikely. My thing says to read from another thing, so let me go find it. Okay. While the brothers were struggling to get their shit together, Robert Weir, steamboat engineers, came into the scene. He was there to see Fred McLeod, and I think it was because he had some shipping supplies to trade or give. I'm not sure what the contract was, but during the convo, Weir saw a gold chain in the pocket watch basically the brothers made for Fred. He saw the gold chain and asked Fred about it, like where he got it and stuff. Fred explained it was from his brothers who got the gold on their expedition, and they needed supplies to go back the next year. Weir basically was like, you know what, I'm breaking my contract with the HBC, and I want to go find this gold with your brothers. So he did exactly that. Yeah, he found the brothers, Frank and Willie, and he told the brothers that he would give them the supplies if he could go on the expedition. The brothers agreed, and Frank, Willie, and Weir went on the expedition the spring. But Charlie was like, you know what? I didn't find gold the first time. I'm not going back again. So he stayed back. The following winter, when the brothers did not return, basically they went on the expedition with Weir and they did not return. This wasn't really concerning for Fred because he knew his brothers were ready to survive the wilderness. They've done it before. They can do it again. It wasn't really a concern, and I think he really believed that they striked big, so they're probably going to stay back. Time flew by, but Frank and Willie did not return. And in the spring of 1907, an abandoned canoe similar to the one the McLeod brothers and Weir took was found along South Nahanni River. The news spread about the abandoned canoe, and eventually Fred found out. Fred, he had no way of knowing whether the canoe belonged to his brothers, but he kind of had like a sneaking suspicion that it might have been. And so he sent a message to his family telling them about the canoe, and then Frank and Willie were still out there. Charlie McLeod, so the Frank and Willie's half brother who stayed behind, he kind of set up a search party with his younger brother Danny in 1908. The search party consisted of 6 people. This included a RCMP officer and 2 Lafferty brothers. The audiobook kept on saying Lafferty like I'm supposed to know who that is. I honestly didn't. When I searched up Lafferty brothers online, there was a case in Ohio, but the timelines didn't match. So I searched up Lafferty brothers because I was like, who are they? Who are they? I need to know. So I searched up Lafferty brothers and then Nahanni National Park. And they might have been physicians. Lafferty, the last name was, somebody was there. 2 brothers were there during this time, and they were physicians. So that's what I think, who they were. So they went up the first canyon and came to a place where people could take shelter. They scanned the areas for human presence, and one of them mentioned that there was a clearing and the trees across the river, so they canoed over. So in the clearing, they found an abandoned dog sled, and Charlie recognized some of his brother's belongings in there, and there was also a note that said that they have found fine prospect. So they found gold, but they kind of left their dog sled and belongings behind. I'm assuming it was because, like, if somebody wanted to find them, they could have found the dog sled. It was, like, big enough. So it was probably like just a sign. After finding the note, the group of 6 men continued to the second canyon where they found a second clearing. Here at the campground, they found something very horrifying. So around the campfire that was still going, they found 2 skeletal remains, both headless. One of the skeletal remains was on his back, and then he was rolled inside of a blanket, making it look like the person died in his sleep. The other one was on their chest, reaching for a rifle nearby. The bodies, based off how they were positioned, suggested they might have been attacked, because one body was reaching for the rifle, which was still there. It was believed that the first one was killed, lying on their back, and the other one, so the one reaching for the rifle, tried to do something, like save them and whatnot. To be honest, I don't know if the fire was on. Some podcasts said like it was going, some said it wasn't going. I'm gonna assume we don't know when these skeletal remains were like dead, when they died. I'm gonna assume it's off, but it's creepier to think that it was still going. I guess from my research, you can't really tell, but if you listen to the audiobook, if you ever have the opportunity to, oftentimes when these men, the brothers or Charlie, they would leave in the winter to get to Nahanni in the spring. And they would stay the summer, maybe come back in the fall, then they would stay until like, I'm assuming January. I'm assuming it just makes sense to think of it like in calendars. So if they left in January, they'd come to Nahanni in the spring, they'd stay till the fall, then they'd come back before the snow starts falling, and then if they wanted to go back, they'd start their journey again in January, and so on. But again, they are coming from Edmonton, so by the time they get to Fort Liard or anywhere up north, I guess it would be spring by then. Again, they're taking like dog sleds, and they're not going by like air or anything, so it would take a while. The expedition was very rough, and the audiobook and some podcasts do mention how rough it was to get there. But basically, there was a couple of years that went by. At least 2 to 3 years that went by before Charlie was like, okay, we're going back to find these 2. So yeah, they found the dead bodies. So from the clothes and items surrounding the bodies, Charlie identified the skeletal remains were his brothers. Some of the items included gold rings and a pocket watch. The gold rings belonged to Willie, and the pocket watch, which was also made of gold, belonged to Frank. This may have suggested that it wasn't a robbery, but let's continue on. So while trying to discover what happened to the crew, the 6 policemen found crates of supplies all neatly stored. However, shovels and picks, both of which Willie and Frank had with them, were missing. And they also found crates of gold, so like quarter nuggets or something like that. So again, the gold is there, so it probably not a robbery. It really just showed that the McLeod brothers did find gold before dying. What was missing was Weir and the heads of the two bodies. So yeah, the heads were missing. Charlie and Danny and the remaining crew had to bury Frank and Willie there, and they marked their graves with wooden crosses. The gang returned to Fort Liard, where they were able to inform the RCMP of their findings. And at this point, Charlie was like, okay, we didn't find Robert Weir. There's two people that are dead and headless. There's foul play here. So the RCMP also suspected foul play and started an expedition the following year. So yeah, they had to wait a year because I'm assuming snowfall, or maybe it was in the season to start doing the investigation. Charlie also helped the police officers get to the location, which was now called Deadman's Valley because the news spread. After the investigation, RCMP concluded that the McLeod brothers did eventually find gold and probably did strike big. However, Weir got greedy and took off with the gold and the McLeod brothers' heads. I don't know why he would take the heads, but okay. The following year, there was a discovery that changed the opinions of the RCMP. 3 miles away from Deadman's Valley, a group of natives found the skeletal remain and reported to the authorities. They reported to the authorities at Fort Simpson. Fort Simpson is like north of Nahanni. It's on the map. Not north. Yeah, it's a bit. It's in there. Corporal Arthur H. L. Miller of Fort Smith of Northwest Territory assumed it was Weir, and since no gold was found with the body, Corporal Miller made a controversial opinion. To me, this opinion does not work, but here it is. He believed that Willie and Frank, through some accident, lost their canoe along with their supplies and starved to death. I don't agree. You guys can make note of it and tell me what you think.
So Corporal Miller is making the opinion that Weir is the one who lost his canoe and starved to death, or he's talking about the original two?
This was before forensics. They found a body. They thought it was Weir, but they didn't have anyone to be like, this is definitely Weir.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
So the first two bodies that were found, and then Charlie's like, those are my brothers, there was belongings. That's how he knew it was his brothers. But the second body that was found, there was no belongings. But the location of where the second body or the third body that was found was just south of where the brothers' bodies were found. So they assumed it was Weir. But there's no confirmation. Again, it was headless, so they don't know what the dude looked like. So Weir went with the brothers. He said he'd give them supplies as long as he's allowed to go with them. So the brothers were found dead, no heads, and Weir was gone. So they initially believed that it was Weir. But the year after, when they found another body just miles south from where the brothers were found dead, they assumed it was Weir. So Miller at this point said that, okay, so the brothers starved to death, and maybe at some point Weir was like, let me go get help. A lot of people, especially the natives in the area, it's in the audiobook, said that where the bodies were found and especially where Weir was found, it wasn't too far away from civilization. This is where the controversy is. They believe that the brothers, if they ran out of supplies or food, they could have easily walked back. They were capable enough to walk back to civilization and get those supplies. Some people believe that it wasn't Weir. However, the fact that the brothers may have been starving, there was a lot of support by the police because the McLeod brothers did not have very many equipments or food. They had 50 pounds of flour and 5 pounds of tea. Due to this theory, the RCMP dismissed the case as an unfortunate accident. This theory is maintained to this day. However, a lot of people knew the area, and especially the brothers, and they truly believed that the brothers were actually murdered. And because of the placement of the bodies and stuff. Charlie too. Charlie is their half-brother. They also believe that perhaps they were murdered because they were fully capable of surviving in these conditions. There's a lot of theories. I'm not going to go into them because I said there's a lot more to be found. So let me tell you a little bit more about Weir, because there's people that believe that the second body that was found was Weir's. But a lot of people did spot Weir in BC and in the Northwest Territories after the death of the brothers, but none of this is confirmed. However, I think a couple of podcasts did mention that Charlie became unknowingly, like he wasn't sure who this person was, but he became friends with a man named Robert Weir, and they were such good friends that on his deathbed, Weir confessed to killing the two brothers. But again, it's not confirmed. Oh yeah, I do have a little bit of theories. Do you have anything to say, Raf?
What? Okay, well, yeah, like, okay, so I've been writing down like some theories, but like, okay, so just to make sure I understand what happened. So like so they think the third body is Weir, okay? But like down the line, a few years later, whatever, some people spot Weir or supposedly spot Weir in BC, and on top of that, the half brother Charlie has a friend called Weir.
Yeah, so this would be much later down the line. He becomes friends with someone with the last name or just the name Robert Weir. Again, I don't know if this
Yeah.
story is confirmed, but on Weir's deathbed, he confessed to killing two brothers for gold.
This new Weir that shows up down the line.
Yeah, and his name is Robert Weir, so it could be the same Weir. Charlie didn't know that this was the dude that his brothers went on an expedition with.
See, I kind of wonder about that because like the first thing I thought was, and I don't know. Wait, are we gonna be talking about theories right now, or we wait till later?
I want to know what you
Oh, you're
think, cause like I have theories for this beheading, but and I want to know what you guys
yeah.
think, because so like how do you want to do it? Do you want to tell me what you think, or do you want me to read what I have?
Okay. Well, in that case, yeah. Let's do theories. Okay, because I got some ideas here. Because I'm calling bullshit on everyone everywhere. Okay. So
You, you might be just burning your notebook because I have a surprise at the end.
okay. So first off, I feel like okay, one of the first things I thought of
Mm-hmm.
was that Weir faked his death. So like, yeah, I still think he's probably the most likely person who killed those two. Maybe he did the head decapitation because of like of that story about the Nahanni. Wait, that okay, is it
Yeah,
Nahanni people or
Naha
Naha
people.
people? Apologies. So that story concerning about like the Naha people, he probably did the whole like headless thing, thinking like, oh, it's gonna like make them think that it was like people in the region or something. And then he makes off with, okay, but here's the thing, he doesn't take all the gold. He leaves enough gold that everyone
Yeah.
thinks that, oh, they struck rich. But actually, they struck heavy rich. He took most of it, right?
Oh yeah. And he left some or whatever he could. Do you think, because like these are nuggets, if they struck huge, do you think people were with Weir?
With Weir.
Like he had other people join him? He obviously can't carry all that crate if they struck
Well,
huge.
I'm wondering about that too because it's either one or two things. Either Weir had his own crew, or and
Yeah.
this might be the more likely one. They found where all that gold was, but they could only take so much back.
Yeah.
So what he did is he killed them and left the amount that they took back. So everyone thought like because it was so much, that's what they found. But then he goes back to wherever like he
Yeah.
goes back to where they got all that gold, gets the rest of the gold from there with probably like another crew or a group of people, whatever, and then vanishes into the wind.
Mhm.
But then obviously he thinks, all right, people are going to at some point figure out, hey, that I was with them. So
Yeah.
somebody on that crew, or probably somebody on that crew, whatever, he's like, hey, we're gonna off you. So he offs that person so that that person can be found later, and then um yeah, that person who's found later is now the quote unquote weird, is the one who's like kind of blamed for it or whatever. Now, that's like the first kind of idea, and then he like runs off and to the distance with all his gold, lives his life, realizes, murder is wrong, and then confesses on his deathbed. But I also think to Charlie,
To
and
Charlie.
maybe him and Charlie were in on it from the very beginning.
Maybe. I mean, Robert Weir kind of showed up randomly. And I think in the audiobook, if you look at the map, he came in through Fort Providence,
Yeah.
which is, it's eastern. So right on top of the what is that? Great Slave Lake.
Oh, yeah, okay, I see it.
Yeah, so he came through Fort Providence. That's where he met Fred. So his whole intention, he worked for the HBC. His whole intention was to drop supply to Fred, and that's where he came in. And I'm not sure exactly if they met at Fort Providence or Fort Liard. So
Oh. Yo, wait,
maybe,
wait, wait. Wait,
yeah.
this is weird. Oh, I totally forgot he worked for HVC. Okay, I feel like that totally solidifies my thing now because HVC was such a big company. I could totally see a situation where they wanted the gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they send like an inside man to kind of go, and even the whole like way that the crime scene is set up, it's probably also staged,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Like
yeah,
the
like with the reaching
yeah,
of the gun and stuff. No, I believe
oh
you.
yeah. So like that would totally make sense. I wish there was a way to see whether or not HBC's profits like skyrocketed
Went
like
up.
right after that, Did they like
Yeah.
purchase a bunch of like additional stuff that, we don't know about? Who knows? But another reason why that would probably be it too, and I feel like maybe I'm reaching, but I don't care, is when the RCMP got involved and changed their mind. Like that Corporal Miller was like, oh, you know what? Maybe they just lost the canoe and starved to
Hmm.
death. Maybe Corporal Miller was paid out by HBC, who got this ton of gold through Weir.
Yeah, but Miller was also the person that believed that that dead body was
But yeah,
Weir.
but that's why I'm saying that would totally work in their advantage because Weir is in the clear.
True,
He has
true.
all this money. HBC has their money. Corporal Miller's been paid out. Done deal. And Charlie is
Hmm.
somehow involved. Okay, it's possible that Weir felt bad later in life and apologizes to Charlie. Okay, or they were in it from the beginning.
Yeah.
And the thing that kind of makes me like consider this like heavily too is because
Hmm.
wait, you've read Harry Potter, right?
No.
No. Okay,
No.
that's okay. So in the last book, there's this one little tidbit that we're introduced to, like the Deathly Hallows, whatever, right? And then there's this guy who gets like the Elder Wand, the most powerful one in the world, can murder anyone, blah blah blah. He walks around kind of boasting about everything it can do, and then one day gets drunk, somebody steals the wand from him and
Hmm.
kills him. And when we were talking about how like Willie and Frank would like gamble all the money that they made, I can definitely see a situation where somebody's like
Yeah.
looking at them and like, you're wasting that, you know? So I'm gonna take it from you. And then gets the backing
Yeah.
of like HBC, for example, and
Hmm.
bada bing, bada boom, clean crime, getaway.
Okay. Yeah, no, those are all fair. So I went on down a rabbit hole as well, being like, well, where's the head? So I'm gonna read you what I have down.
Yep.
So many reports also highlight the odd ways of how the heads were being removed, like if they were ripped off or twisted off or by force. Other believe that the heads were chewed
Chewed
off.
off.
Charlie, who actually saw the bodies, yeah, like by animals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Charlie, who saw the dead bodies, believed that the heads were cut off neat and done with a sharp object. He
Hmm.
believed that the offender dropped the head into the Nahanni Valley to hide bullet wounds.
Oh.
So yeah, that makes sense. If you drop a head into the Nahanni Valley, or just the river, Nahanni River,
Hmm.
sorry, he dropped the heads into the Nahanni River. That stream, in a lot of the other cases that I've going to
Hmm.
talk about in the series, that water rushes like nothing. It's just rushing. And if something is dropped, even a head, I don't think it's going to be found. So this is a
Hmm.
possible, if and it goes well with your theory. The other one was it's been separated through the process of natural decomposition. This one I don't really agree with because decomposition of the head naturally takes a while, so the body's going to decompose first, and because of the brain and the skull, the head just takes naturally a longer time to decompose.
I'm sorry, wait. They were saying that the head decomposed and left the rest of the skeleton?
Yeah, that's what they're saying. Or like
Like,
animals found it in the process.
we have skeletons, like with the skulls intact from like thousands of years. Okay.
That's why I said I don't agree with this theory.
Yeah, I see.
Scavengers such as forest animals took the heads. The rest of the body was neglected because of clothing and blankets,
Hmm.
and or that the human brain takes a longer time to decompose. This causes the brains to like the brain. It's still there to like create a smell, so that's going to attract animals
Yeah.
or cannibals. I don't know. Other believes the heads were amputated at the time of their deaths. Mackenzie trappers believe this was done by a mad trapper, a fugitive, someone who ran away, escapee from Yukon who took the heads as trophies. Also a possibility. Again, that would
Hmm.
assume that the second body that was found was Weir's. So the brothers then Weir's. And then the other theory was Nahanni
Okay.
natives. They did it to intimidate white people from coming into their territory. So if a white man dies without a head, another white man comes, sees, and is like, no, fuck, we're going in there. And that's, so that was my theories. And there was another one called the Nahanni, which is a giant harried head hunting
Hmm.
wild man. So I too went down a rabbit hole when I first about what happened to this, but I
Hmm.
realized that there were more victims
Hmm.
in the Nahanni Valley. So, would you like to know the victims and what happened to them? And you can tell me if you still believe your theory.
Okay. Now we're kind of finished with the Willie Frank case, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so now we're jumping forward, or is this also during the same time frame?
It's around this during. It's around and after. So
Around and after. Okay.
I tried my best to keep it in a linear order.
Okay.
So yeah. So are you ready?
All right. I'm just gonna finish jotting this, and yeah, I'm good to go.
All right. 1917, Swiss prospector Martin Jorgensen was found decapitated next to his burnt down cabin
Damn.
in Flat River.
Okay.
Let me know if you need time to write.
So sorry. This was 19 what?
1917.
1917. Okay, got it.
In 1926. This one's a little bit confusing because in some podcasts and reports, the woman's name was Anne. In some other reports,
Hmm.
it's a woman or girl named May, but the last name is similar. So, and their stories are kind of similar. So I assumed it was more the same story. So I kind of put it together. In 1926, a
Yep.
woman named Anne or May Lafferty, not related to the physicians, disappeared from her hunting party overnight. The same night, a hunter was woken up by weird splashing noises in the river. When he went back to check, out of his tent, he saw a woman that matched the description of Anne or May, was completely naked, climbing up a hillside on all fours. Anne or May did turn around to look at the
Hmm.
man. When she did, the man immediately went back into his shelter. He said the expression Anne or May had on her face was horribly wrong, like she might have been possessed. So instead of helping, because he's like,
Hmm.
this is a demon from somewhere inside the forest, he waited the night, and I think he reported to the RCMP the next day. However, Anne or May Lafferty was never found, and the other story goes that her May Lafferty's disappearance, the only difference is that she too was on a hunting trip, and her, I guess, people in her team went to look for her. So they found like footsteps and trails and random clothes just on this trail. So when they believe that she too was naked, and her trail kind of stops at the edge of the cliff or a stream of water that was too fast to cross. So this was the Nahanni River. However, her footsteps also reappeared on the other side. So
Hmm.
one podcast said she was this girl that I just said, who her footsteps found on the other side. She was also found climbing up a mountain, also naked, and nobody could
Hmm.
do anything about it. And she was also never found.
This is now someone else.
This is someone. I assumed Anne and May were the same person
Yeah.
because they're stories, but some sites have them separated.
Okay.
But again, it's like they were naked, they were found in weird circumstances. People thought they were possessed and they were never found. So I'm like, okay, maybe I can put their story together. The reason why I did that as well, because May Lafferty's disappearance was never associated with a year. Whereas the
Mm.
1926, the women disappeared. In some sources, it says her name was Anne. In some sources, say her name was May.
What if it was Marianne?
Again, I don't know, but I feel like it's the same case. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just wanted to make sure that people knew that there's two different things, and her name could have been anything.
Hmm.
In 1929, Angus Hall, a gold prospector, vanished without a trace.
Hmm.
In 1931, prospector Phil Power's cabin was found burned to the ground with Phil inside.
Hmm.
In 1936, Mulholland and Epler disappeared, so two men. In 1940, a man named Holmberg was found dead. Don't know if he was decapitated or not. In 1945, an unknown body of a miner from Ontario was found.
Uh,
He was in his sleeping bag, but no head.
okay, whoa. 1945, we have Minor No Head.
Yeah,
And then before that, 1940, what?
yeah. A man named Holmberg was found dead, but I'm not sure if he was decapitated or not.
Okay, also a prospector?
It doesn't say, but I assume so.
I'm seeing a pattern.
Mm-hmm. Also, May or Anne Lafferty, I believe she was a native from a native tribe.
Oh, okay.
So, okay. So next, around the same time as the unknown man from Ontario, a miner named John O'Brien suddenly went missing. After a search party went to find him, he was found next to his campfire, frozen to death with a match still in his hand. It is reported that it looked like he had been flash frozen while trying to light a match.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so like he's trying to light a match and he immediately just freezes to death.
And this is like 19 what?
It's around the same time as the unknown body of the miner was found. That was 1945, so around that time.
Okay, so, and was this like dead of winter?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I can see how that happened. All right.
1949, a man named Shabak was found dead in his cabin. His diary showed that after 43 days without food, he wrote "Dead man here" on a piece of wood and nailed it to the cabin door and went inside. So maybe he committed suicide, but he was found dead. Some point before
Hmm.
1962, a man committed suicide by setting off a dynamite strapped around his waist. There's a whole story with this one, and that will be a part of the
Mm-hmm.
series. In 1962, a flight pilot survived a crash into the Nahanni Valley. He did set up camp for a short period of time where the plane initially crashed. In his diary, he was confident that he would be rescued because rescue planes would fly over him, but somehow they did not see his camp. When search and rescue did find his camp, he was nowhere to be there, and his diary stopped after day 50. He was never found.
Mm.
So at the beginning, I said there was recorded 44 disappearance, so that was up until 1996. Oh, sorry, 1969.
This flight pilot was 1969.
No, no, no. So he was in 1962, and
Okay.
up until 1969, there was 44 recorded disappearances.
Okay.
Okay, last one. In 2005, two experienced bushmen, David Horsey and Frederick Hardsity, vanished from their cabin. They were found a month later in places where the search party already checked. David was found with burns on his arms and Fred floating in the river. The authorities, I think, closed the case saying it was hypothermia, but their families were not happy with the investigation. One family member even said that there were bullet shots all over their cabin.
Hmm.
So, that is all the victims, and a lot of them you will be hearing detailed cases somewhere in the series. What are your thoughts?
I'm trying to see a pattern, but like, okay, problem is what we have is the dates people were found, not the dates when things happen. Because like at first, the fact that it was prospectors up until like 1940, like hunters and prospectors were the ones like being found and stuff. That made me think like, okay, maybe this is like a place where
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to kill people that you want to kill, and like
Mm-hmm.
no one, and then you can like, set stuff up and make it look like it's a certain way, and it'll take a very long time before they're found. So,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm thinking with the prospectors things, like either they're finding an area or gold that they're not supposed to find, or actually, yeah, that's really what I was thinking. But now, when you get to like 1945, now you have miners involved. Like, why do you have miners there? And then the quote unquote, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say quote unquote suicide here because I is that one of the cases we're going to talk more about, Shabbat? Then in 1945, the one who was like 43 days without food.
I will have to look into his case. I haven't heard much, but there's a similar there might be like a one page detailed case about him, so if that's the case I will. So there's also similar cases where people had to go without food in that area for a while. So we can probably pick up on some things that are similar.
Some
Yeah.
patterns there. Yeah, because it feels, honestly, it feels so weird. Because once you get to like 1945 and then the few that you've mentioned since, it's like now it's like, oh, it's probably suicide. Oh, look, it's like very directed to potentially be that.
Mhm.
Right? And then I don't know like what other deaths there were between like 1962 and 1969. And then what if there were some between 1969 and 2005 too? We don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
and
don't
then the
know.
one in 2005, one in the river and the other one is burnt. Like,
Yeah, his arm was burnt.
but was the guy okay, the guy with his arm burnt? Did you by any chance see a description of like where his body was?
I think it was in the bush.
In the bush.
Yeah, like thick bushes.
And then the guy who was found in the river. Did they say anything about? They just said he was found in the river.
Yeah, I can see for like if I can find a detail about this case and maybe that will be an episode, but this was just a blurb under Mysteries of Nahanni Valley.
Okay, because this one kind of sounds like there's a third party involved. Okay, either like the two of them,
It does. It
right?
does. It does sound like. Yeah, and I don't know if this is related to the deaths, like disappearances that have been happening throughout the 1900s. I mean, they might all be separate incidences, and these people were killed, burnt alive, frozen to death under different circumstances. There's people, they had enemies. Or it could also be the same people. But the jump from the 1960s to the 2005 was like, maybe this is a separate case.
Okay. All right. So we can look at the 2005 thing as been like, yeah, a little bit unique.
Mm-hmm.
My overall theory right now is that someone was killing people and then using that story about decapitation as
Mm-hmm.
like a way to like make it like seem all mysterious slash
Mm.
blame the Naha, right? That's what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we know for a fact that, like, often colonizers did use native people as a
Yeah. So
scapegoat.
like I'm thinking that's probably what it is for most of these. The miner with no head, most likely, but like the other miner who tried to light a match, that one might actually have been like a full-on accident. This might have just been a case of like a kid who was like, I'm gonna go look for gold and stuff, and I'm gonna be in the wilderness, and then he ends up drinking, passes out. It's the middle of winter. He wakes up. He's like, I'm freezing cold, tries to light a match, but at that point, he's like, final stages of death, pretty much, and then gone. And then, okay, the Anne and May stories from 1926. That's just full on BS. I don't know.
Yeah, I've thought about that too.
That's just what I'm gonna say. Cause I don't know. Maybe there's like a bit more here, but like, did they ever look at the guy who like that reported that she was like naked and climbing up the wall and looking all
Mm-hmm.
possessed and stuff? Because like I feel like that guy or somebody associated to him
Yeah.
most likely is who killed Anne and or May, and then they come up with this whole story about like demonic possession and she disappeared into the wind and look at her footsteps, they go to the cliff. I was actually gonna ask, like, there were no other sets of footsteps. It's just her. She's just like walking to the water. Oh no, and she has footsteps on the other side too. Like, it's a good place to hide bodies when you do crimes.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So, Anne's body was never found, and during the time of her disappearance, it was reported to the authority that there was a woman missing, and with her name, her details. So, this man, when I believe in a podcast, it said this man, when he saw Anne, he knew it was Anne, but because
Yep.
she was naked and he just thought that she was possessed
Mm-hmm.
by whatever is. People at this point really feared the valley, not only because this is where like people were being found dead with their heads cut off, but people generally when they went in took a good risk, which is why like the RCMP, when at some point they decided that whenever there was a case from up north, that far up north, they just said like, okay, we can't do anything about it.
Ooh.
It is what it is. And they actually stopped like, I'm sure they checked whatever they could, but they couldn't do much more than that. Again, it's because there's a fear of, dying.
Okay, but the Nahar people still stayed in the region, right?
The Naha people, yes and no, because I will actually talk about more of them in
Okay.
the series later. The Naha people actually, once people are starting to blame them
Mm-hmm.
for the killings, they actually moved farther north into the Nahanni Valley.
Mm-hmm.
So, like in places where it was not accessible. And most of these cases did occur in the
Mm.
South Nahanni, like the river. So they moved far north.
Yeah. South Nahanni River, around the South Nahanni River, which, as we already know from our first case, is where our good friends Willie and Frank started finding gold.
Mm-hmm.
Coincidence? I think not.
Yes. So the theories go. There was a mad trapper. We'll talk about him maybe the next time I cover the series.
Yeah.
He was out there. He lived there, but he passed away in the 1930s. However, we can see that the killings happened way beyond that. But anyway, a lot of the killings before the 1930s, people blamed it on him. We'll talk about him later. There's a lot of cryptids out there. A lot of course, we have the Naha people, and then it is also believed that the Nahanni Valley is very cursed. In a simple way, we'll talk about the curse because I was listening to the curse episode in one of the podcasts, and I was very fascinated because it really talks about the indigenous culture and their belief systems. So we will definitely cover that.
Yeah.
But in short form, the curse is that if you take something from Nahanni, Nahanni takes your head or you.
Okay.
So, yeah, all these people that came into Nahanni had some sort of reason to take something from Nahanni, whether it be gold, whether it be the fat animals or the lush crops, and that's why they all died. And that to me makes a lot of sense. So, to end things off, I mean, I'm done. Do you have anything to add?
I'm really excited to touch on this again later. This mad trapper person does actually kind of make me update my theory a little bit. Rather than like a big conspiracy, I guess, to like... Because I could actually see why people would think that maybe it was him until he like died in the 1930s. Because like I was mentioning earlier, once you get to like 1940s, the deaths are a little different, right? So I can see why people would look at it at him, so I'm just gonna like circle that right now as like something to touch on again. The Nahanni Valley being cursed. If you take something, it takes your head.
Yeah.
Okay, everything comes from somewhere, right? All curses, all stories about places, they all start somewhere. Now, sure, you could look at it as like what everyone thought, that like, oh, I don't want to say specifically the Naha people were doing this, but like maybe Naha individuals at time, that like this was a way to like in the long term protect the space, so that people wouldn't be taking stuff from it. But I have a totally other theory on that one. I would say if you take something from Nahanni, it takes your head, but I think rather than it takes your head, someone else who has a vested interest in the area takes your head. Because if you knew that the curse wasn't real, because you were the one taking people's heads, like, it works for you, right? The resources are all there for you. The gold or whatever the heck is there for you. All you have to do is convince everybody else not to come in. And now I'm not saying that this was necessarily like the Naha people. I still think that there's like a third party here with a vested interest.
Okay.
My money is on HBC. Don't sue me, HBC, but like, your past is kind of like...
HBC's dying.
Yeah, and anyways, your past is kind of like messed up anyways, so like, yeah, don't come after me. But like, so I don't know, that's it. That's all I got.
When I first heard about this case, the McLeod brothers, a lot of the podcasts were saying like, well, it can't be a tribe that still exists today.
Yeah.
I started this episode saying there's 80% of Canada that's yet to be discovered.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about there still being a tribe out there?
Like what do you mean, like a tribe that people haven't seen or met yet?
Yeah, exactly. It necessarily doesn't have to be the Naha tribe, but just a general tribe that's out there.
I'll be honest, I would be really, really skeptical on it because
Okay.
I'm
not saying like they're doing the killing. I'm not saying that. I want to know your opinions.
Oh, just like that there's there's a tribe or there's a group of people that haven't been found yet.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
Unless like they live underground, I'll be frank. Because as much as like, yeah, 80% of Canada I guess is uninhabited, sure, but there's a reason why 80% of it is uninhabited. This is like, out of that 80%, you have like maybe half of it that is like ice and fresh water and all that stuff northwards that barely anyone can live there to begin with, and then the other half is like you just have like little pockets of communities here and there, like living in that space. But in a day and age where we have like satellite imagery and we kind of already know like the whole layout of the country, like I would be hard pressed to believe that there is peoples who have not been found. But on the flip side, if you look at South America and you look at the rainforest, there are accounts of like groups of people that not necessarily have been like recently found or anything like that, but rather that are not in touch with, the modern day, right? And there's a lot of instances of that. So I can see like maybe, just a bare maybe, there are people who are not necessarily in touch with modern society kind of thing, but I feel like everyone's accounted for. Unless they were like living underground and they're super good at it. I don't know.
We don't know. Possibility is endless, like North Centennial Island.
North Centennial Island. What is that?
It's that island where, like, you don't know about North Centennial Island?
Nope.
What the heck? It's North. Now I'm like, am I saying it wrong?
Oh, North Sentinel Island?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything about this place.
Damn, it was on the news for so long because people tried to go in there to teach the natives who live there and have been living there for many ages about the Bible, and they were dead. I mean, the people who went in, they were killed.
Oh, wow. And this is interesting.
I'm surprised you've never heard about this.
Let's see. Act of 1956 prohibits travel to the island. Yo, what? Order to protect the remaining tribal community from mainland.
You're the one living under a rock.
Honestly, Asim, I've never heard about anything that happens in the world. Like, I live under a rock. Yo, when it comes to, like, social things going on, like, I really am. You tell me about the most recent, like, tech advances.
Yeah.
I've heard about everything.
Okay, so this was my episode, and it's ongoing. So we'll talk about the curse. You showed interest in the Mad Trapper. We'll talk about the Mad Trapper, and we'll also talk about the cryptids that have been spotted, or legends of cryptids that have come from Nahanni. We'll also look into those. I just want to say, a lot of like recent UFO sightings have occurred in the Nahanni and BC area. So aliens.
You know what? Like, that is, as far as I'm concerned, propaganda to get people interested in going to the park.
Okay, I actually wanted to add one more thing. So, this park is a national park, which means people are allowed to visit it. If you go to Parks Canada, you can find tours, flight details to go to this park. That being said, I remember sharing this story with Neha, and she's like, let me go check my security system right now. This park, there's no highway or roadway to this park. You have to go by air, water, and you might be able to hike there. I'm not sure. But even if you go visit the park, a lot of trails and roads are closed to the general public. Any thoughts? You're like, so many. I don't know where to begin.
Yeah, remember how I was saying like Conspiracy Central, like this is where you can like toss like bodies and shit? I'll be honest, like this is starting to sound more and more like a low-key Area 51 for Canada. Just saying.
I feel like you're starting a new conspiracy theory.
Well, yeah.
But you're not wrong. There's 44 people who disappeared. And then there's all those people who were coming in from the Klondike Gold Rush.
Yep.
And then there's a bunch of people from the Klondike Gold Rush who wanted to go to the next mountain, really, to see if they can find there. So a lot of people have been going missing. We don't know why. I mean, a lot of podcasts and the sources that I searched up did say the trains are not flat. There's mountains, there's caves, there's hot springs. I'm sure maybe there's still traps active that were set long time ago from trappers. So the possibilities are endless, and people do go missing on hiking trails all the time.
Yep. Which is why we said no more hikes. Well, no, that's not the reason why. There was another reason why we said that to our friend group, but you know.
No, I understand. But I think there's some people who would still go there for hikes. Anyways.
Yes, there are.
Anyways, this is my episode. I am so happy this first portion is done. I was really scared about presenting. I just want it to be linear in some way,
Mm.
shape, or form.
Okay, well, this has been really interesting. It will be great to see how multi-episode series are going to shape up. I obviously have my conspiracy theories. I don't care how out of pocket they are, but you know what? I stand by them unless something changes. But for now, thank you very much, Ipsha. And everyone, please, do the usual comment, like, subscribe, and such. We'll have the Spotify link in the description. So if y'all can go there, listen to that, and, download some episodes and such, that would be pretty sweet. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we shall
Thank
see you
you.
next week. Bye.
Bye.